Hello and welcome to 10 Mistakes in E-Learning Design. My name is Lindsay, and my day job is teaching students to use Articulate Storyline and Adobe Captivate as part of an introductory course in a Master's of Instructional Design and Technology program. So over the years, I have created literally hundreds of projects created by beginners using Storyline and Captivate. I see the same mistakes over and over again, so I want to share with you the 10 biggest mistakes I see and how you can redesign them to be more effective. So let's go ahead and dive in by starting with navigation. All right, mistake number 1. Newbies make this mistake all the time. They use redundant navigation. There are built-in navigation controls to Storyline and Captivate, but if you have your own controls that you're also putting on screen, it becomes redundant really quickly. Here's an example. Take a look here on screen. Where do you click if you want to click next? You have a couple of options. You got a next button up here, and you got a next button down here. You also have a back button on screen and a previous button down here. Now, depending on how this is programmed, they could go to the same place, they could go different places. These are here, down here in the player bar, because they are a default in Storyline. You have to actually go in and deactivate those if you create your own custom navigation, which you should do. So you take those off the player bar, and then you just have the next and back on screen. So both Storyline and Captivate have built-in navigation, but if you plan to have your own navigation on screen, you need to take off the navigation controls in the player bar so it's very, very clear where the user is supposed to click. You don't want them guessing or being confused or ending up someplace that they are not supposed to. Mistake number 2, inconsistent navigation. Take a look here. Where do you click to go next, and where do you click to go back? It's fairly clear, right? You've got a next button up here, you got a back button down here, a little bit hard to read, and then maybe on the next slide, we have a couple more options. Where do you click to go next? Where do you click to go back? Back's probably pretty clear. I think this is the next button up here, but from slide to slide, the navigation changes. This person wants to use custom navigation, but it's varying from slide to slide. That's confusing, and it adds to cognitive load for the user, so it actually detracts from the learning experience. How this should be redesigned is that every slide should have the same next and back buttons, however you want them to look, and they should always be in the same place. Every slide should have a similar layout for the navigation with an identical look and feel for the next and back buttons. Much better user experience. So takeaways here, if a navigation experience is inconsistent, it does lead to extraneous cognitive load, which means students or your learners are distracted from learning and they're trying to focus instead on just using the tutorial. Pick one, custom or built-in. Choose one, stick with it. If you're doing custom navigation, your own buttons on screen, deactivate the built-in navigation controls in the player bar. Also, choose a specific look and feel for your custom buttons and stick to it. If something is an interactive button, it should have the same look and feel through the entire tutorial. All right, let's move on to interactivity. All right, mistake number 3 I see all the time, and I'm always asking myself, is this interactive? So take a look at this slide here. What do you think is interactive and what do you think is not interactive? It's really hard to tell, right? So I see this box says go to next slide, this box says go to previous slide. I'm guessing those are both navigation buttons, okay? Maybe that will take me to where I want to go next. This is previous. But these things, can I click on these too? If I can click on these, I feel like I should be able to click on these as well because they have the same look and feel. So I see this a lot. So a good redesign, again, is to keep a consistent look and feel for your navigation. They are obviously used to be interactive, to control whether you're going forward or backwards. And then what's not interactive has a different look. And now I still don't love this design because these things are in squares. When something's in a square, I feel like I'm going to be able to click on it in some way. But it's better than this, at least. There's a different look and feel for things that are interactive versus things that are not interactive. Something else I see in the is this interactive category. Again, I'm not sure here what is meant to be interactive. Again, we've got a next and back button here. Those are pretty clearly going to be interactive. This again has the same look, and I click on that. What about these? Can I click on these? So this designer intended these dog facts to be clickable, and in Storyline or Captivate, you can make pretty much anything clickable, right? But it's just not super clear what's clickable here and what is not. So how I would redesign it is keep the next and back buttons very clear, consistent with the rest of your navigation, and then you can actually hide your fun facts and make these kind of obviously clickable markers instead. So if you click on those, the fact will appear. It's a more fun, interactive experience. It's less text heavy than what's on screen here. Much cleaner, much more understandable and usable design. You shouldn't have to tell the user where to click. That's always a really good rule of thumb. Clickable versus unclickable should look and feel different. And plain text pretty much never looks clickable, at least in a Storyline or Captivate tutorial, unless it's underlined. But if you are using underlined text, it's going to look like it's a hyperlink, and that's also going to be kind of a confusing experience for your users. All right, let's move on to visual design. Visual design is a key component in designing effective online tutorials. If your visual design is all wrong, it's going to really take away from your learning experience. So here's a really good example. Oftentimes, new designers have their favorite color, something they think looks really cool, but it actually is an accessibility problem. So I see a lot of the time colors will lack contrast. Just take in the beauty of this slide. What do you think about it? If this is easy for you to look at, you have a different vision and perspective on the world than I do. When I look at this, these colors are vibrating. It hurts my eyes. It's like imprinting on my eyeballs. I hate it. Here's another one. Calmer, not vibrating, easier to look at, but we've got gray on gray here. So if you have very good vision, maybe this is pretty easy to read, but this actually lacks sufficient contrast to meet accessibility standards. So this could be difficult to read for a lot of people. Here's a good redesign. We got black text, nice and dark, on a light gray background. This more than meets contrast standards for accessibility. And that fun red accent color is now just relegated to kind of just an accent on the side of the slide. So this is very well laid out. It's clear what we're looking at. Learning Objectives is a good title, has good visual hierarchy, and then each objective is bulleted below that. Very easy to read. Pretty good balance on this slide as far as use of white space and text. Something else I see is images. People love photographs. Everyone loves to look at a fun picture of something, but they don't always make the best backgrounds. They can make reading very, very difficult if they have text layered over them. One way to redesign it is to use your photograph but blur it or make it semi-transparent. Or you can do both, blur and make it semi-transparent. I mean, even PowerPoint has really simple graphic design controls where you can edit your images and blur them or make them semi-transparent, and it's going to help a lot with readability. So you might end up using this photograph as a feature on maybe a title slide, or maybe crop it as an accent picture on the side of a slide. But if you're going to layer text over it, again, contrast really matters. You need to have really good contrast with your text to be readable over a photograph. That doesn't mean you can't use the photograph. It just means you need to do a little bit light editing so it is going to be very easy to read for your user, and it's not going to take away from whatever the user is learning. If you're not sure what a sufficient contrast is, WebAIM has a wonderful contrast checker. You can just Google WebAIM contrast checker, and you can put in your font colors and your background colors, and it'll let you know if it's acceptable or not. Avoid colors that vibrate, even if they have sufficient contrast. If you're looking at something and it's a little too vibrant, you're getting a little bit too much vibration from it, just don't use it. If you really love a color, though, you can use it, just make it an accent color. Don't make it a main color. There's plenty of room on a slide to have accent colors on the slide, accent logos or graphics on the side. Just don't layer it with elements that are really necessary for learning. Just make it an accent on the side. And again, images are great, But if you're going to layer them with text, you have to make sure the text is really readable. So you can blur your images, make them semi-transparent, lighten the color, change the color, whatever. Just make sure that there's really sufficient contrast for your users. Here's another mistake I see. The same sort of exuberance that applies to color selection tends to apply to font selection. If you're using more than 2 fonts, you're doing it wrong. For example, let's count the fonts here on this slide. I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 fonts all on one slide. In the course of a tutorial, sometimes designers will put a different font in every single slide or multiple fonts in every slide that vary slide to slide. It's too much, it's visually really distracting, and it can lead to an amateurish feel for a tutorial versus if you were using the same 2 fonts on every slide. And it's a little bit more balanced design too. So you can see this is 1, 2 fonts on this slide here. So instead of the 4 fonts, we've narrowed it down to just 2. Change the visual hierarchy a little bit. This is bolded, and the same font used for this part of the title is used down here. This is fine. Not the world's most brilliant visual design, but this is a big, big improvement over using 4 fonts. If you're not sure, stick to 2. And there's also some wonderful internet resources out there that have font pairing suggestions, so it'll help you choose which fonts to use together. Now, another mistake that's related here to this slide is when objects are unaligned. This is another very small thing that can make a big difference in making a project feel professional versus amateurish. So again, I've narrowed the fonts down on this slide, but something's still off, right? Things are kind of askew. There's not really a clear alignment going on. The photo's kind of off to the side. The hierarchy's better. The visual hierarchy's better as far as what my eye should focus on, but still not perfect. There you go. A little bit better. Now you can see if we put a line right here, we can see everything is lined up to the center of the slide, and the begin button and text are down here in the right corner. Generally, users expect to see navigation in the bottom right corner when you're using a desktop tutorial. So it's a very clear place to put it, and this is a well-balanced slide. Just for comparison purposes, one more time. This is unaligned, aligned. So tidy. When a slide is really tidy, it makes it feel way more professional than if things are askew. Here's another example. Say it's the menu slide I'm using for my hiking tutorial. What do you see going on here? When you're looking at a slide, consider the balance of a slide, where the eye goes, what you want to look at, what feels amiss. There's kind of a big gap here in the middle as far as white space. It's good that the titles are on the top and the navigation's on the bottom, but you can see there's a different gap here versus over here. The picture feels kind of far over, and these buttons here that are used for the menu navigation, they're just a few pixels off from each other, and the gap between some of them varies. So this one's a little teeny bit wider than the one up here. It's just off enough to make you look at the slide and say, oh, an amateur built this, or someone without attention to detail. Use the alignment feature in your software. Balance your elements on the screen. So I have these 4 buttons here. Now the top and bottom button are aligned with the top and bottom of the image. The image and the buttons have kind of a similar weight on screen, and they're both basically aligned with the center, both horizontally and vertically. So they feel well placed, very solid in the middle. Your eye goes right to them. The title's still in the top left corner, but the title and the subtitle are aligned, and now everything down here is aligned as well. So like elements should be aligned with like elements, and it should have a good balance on screen. Let's revisit that unbalanced slide, unaligned slide. Here's the aligned slide. And this is surprisingly easy to do. Both Storyline and Captivate have alignment tools in them, and I'll actually show you where to find these really quick here. So I'm in the edit mode for PowerPoint. I'm going to select my elements here on screen, pop over to shape format. I'm on a Mac. There is an align button here, and you can actually align these on the left. So poof, look at that, already really tidy. Another thing I can do is say I wanted to move this picture over here. I'm going to align that with the top button. Align, bottom button over here. I'm going to put these back together again. I'm going to select all 4 buttons, pop back over to Align, and I'm going to distribute vertically. Now the gap between each of them is perfect, and also I'm going to realign them on the right. So it might take a little bit of fudging to feel what you think is best for this slide. Now you can see the gaps between each of them are perfectly thanks to the distribute vertically feature, and I use the alignment feature. So now it feels very tidy, very balanced. Both Captivate and Storyline have this feature in them. They have alignment tools and they have distribution tools, so please use them. It's going to be a huge difference between a project looking really amateurish and a project looking like a professional made it. So the tool is called Arrange Align. It aligns objects with each other. Distribute vertically / horizontally. It takes away the gap variations between objects and it spaces them perfectly. Again, you want to look like a professional? This is the way to do it. All right, so that's it for part 1 of this 10 mistakes tutorial. Go ahead and tune into part 2 to learn the next 5 mistakes that I see all the time.